Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a Glacial Geek Top 5. The future of humanity, according to Games Workshop at least, is a bleak existence, with flashes of brilliance that are inevitably snuffed out by some evil or alien. Sometimes, though, there are more sinister or unexpected actions by actors within the universe that affect the citizens of humanity. And that is why today we will be going over our top 5 top 5 Warhammer 40k universe Betrayals. Coming in at number 5, we have Goge Vandire and the Brides of the Emperor. Granted, Goge Boy isn't the most sympathetic of characters in the history of the Grim Darkness, but this one's pretty personal as far as betrayals go. Vandire is remembered for being a jerkus in a history chock full of jerkuses. Initially elected as the Master of the Administratum, his career as a High Lord of Terra started off pretty spectacularly. He decided to take on the grift and abuses of the Ecclesiarchy. In fact, he decided to declare the Ecclesiarch himself a traitor and had him executed, taking over the mantle as head of the Ecclesiarchy himself. He then went on a purge of any cardinals or Ecclesiarchy officials who stood against him, as any stable leader would, and thus began his reign of blood. His leadership, broad strokes here, can best be described as lunacy. From taking pleasure in the torturing of those innocent or guilty, or purifying their souls, as he liked to put it, to virus bombing innocent planets, the list of atrocities perpetrated in his name is long and bloody. During this time, he met the Daughters of the Emperor, a cult to the Emperor in the planet of San Lior. He then tricked the Daughters of the Emperor into becoming his personal bodyguards. Using a Rosarius and the field generator contained within it, he asked them to shoot at him with a plasma pistol, and was protected by the will of the Emperor, instead of the energy field that it obviously was that protected. They joined him, and changed their names to the Brides of the Emperor. The Brides would become his most fervent defenders, and last line of defense, as the rest of the Imperium of Man decided to be done with him. As entire chapters of Adeptus Astartes, maniples of Skitarii from Mars, and regiments of Imperial Guards sieged him on Terra, the Adeptus Custodes convinced Lijah Dominica, the head of the Daughters of the Emperor, to go meet with the Emperor himself in his presence. After what we can only assume was a very inspirational speech about what it's like to sit on a chair for thousands of years, Lijah Dominica left the presence of the Emperor pissed off beyond belief. She returned to her fellow Brides of the Emperor and told them that they needed a divorce from Goge Vandire. They reverted back to the Daughters of the Emperor, and she went to go confront him in his private chambers. He was found there barking orders to people who had long ago left his side, and when confronted told her he had no time to die, he was too busy. She then executed him herself, and thus ended his reign. So while no one may be shedding a tear for Goge Vandire, at the end of the day, that one was pretty rough. Although, to be fair, it was entirely avoidable if he was less of a dick. At number 4, we have Luther and the Lion. I was tempted to put this one at number 1 for personal reasons, but regardless of your penchant for loving or hating the Dark Angels, the betrayal of Luther against Lionel Jonson, the Primarch of the First Legion, the Dark Angels, certainly ranks towards the top of the list. Luther was the man who discovered a feral Lionel Jonson out in the forest of Caliban after he was yeeted there by the forces of chaos. He raised the Primarch in the Order, a monastic brotherhood of knights on Caliban, and would go on to become the Lion's most trusted advisor, mentor, and friend, as they continued to defend Caliban against the beasts of the Deathworld forests. When the Emperor finally reunited with his long-lost son, after conveniently missing all of the diaper changes and late-night school projects, Luther was too old to become a true Astartes. He was given some genetic enhancements to allow him to travel the stars with the rest of the Dark Angels Legion. But that's essentially the Astartes version of giving your younger brother the Mad Catz controller with the wonky joystick in order to play Smash Brothers with you. It's not the same, and he knew it. And his jealousy of the lion and his birthright grew exponentially from that point. It grew to the point that he even questioned whether or not to disable a bomb that he found on the lion's ship before he eventually did it, but that doubt was still there. And the lion found out about this and sent him to his room on Caliban to go handle things at home and take care of business there. Apparently being stuck at home, dealing with uppity nobles and taking care of chaos sorcerers instead of crusading, a knight's favorite pastime, was not the self-care that he probably needed, and his paranoia and anger grew even more until it finally culminated when the lion returned from the Horus Heresy after having to fight his own brothers, and Caliban fired on the returning fleet. This pissed the lion off to no end, and he descended onto the planet to personally kick Luther's ass. The two of them fought in single combat. It's a weird term when there's two of them. But then again, I guess pairs combat just sounds like aggressive figure skating. Anyway, so they fought. A long, protracted battle. And finally, the lion had Luther subdued. He had his life in his hands, but he couldn't bring himself to kill the man who raised him, his former mentor. It was like that scene in Point Break when Keanu Reeves fires his gun into the air. Ah! But Luther was a little less quick on the uptake and fired a blast of chaotic power right into the lion, mortally wounding him. The madness of the situation finally got to Luther, and he screamed in agony as to what he had done. He was captured by the Dark Angels and brought into custody, and the body of the lion was dragged by the Watchers of the Dark into the basement of the Rock. So at the end of the day, the true betrayal was the lion for not just waking up and giving us 40k players a bottle to play with in the game. Number 3, Isstvan III. Let's be honest. The Horus Heresy is filled to the brim with betrayal. They made an entire box set of plastic Heresy-era miniatures titled Betrayal. But in all that betrayal, the worst betrayal is perhaps the first betrayal. Betrayal. When Horus turned his back on the Emperor, he not only turned his back on his father, his brothers, and the Imperium of Man, he turned his back on his fellow legionaries. Not every Space Marine in the Traitor Legions turned their back on the Emperor. There were plenty of Marines within the ranks of the Sons of Horus, the Emperor's Children, the Death Guard, the World Eaters, that remained true to the Emperor and Imperium of Man, that weren't swayed by the powers of the Dark Gods. And this posed a problem, at least for Horus and the other traitor Primarchs, for if they were allowed to stick around, then they would just be throwing wrenches in the gears. Now Horus had an answer for this. It was the Isstvan system. The imperial governor there, Baron Vardis Prahl, revolted against the Imperium. It took many years for this information to make its way back to Terra, but once it did, it was decided that this was something that needed to be handled, and handled fast. So Horus, as War Master, was dispatched to the planet of Isstvan III to go handle the situation. He went, along with his Sons of Horus, with the Primarch Mortarion and his Death Guard, Angron and his World Eaters, and Fulgrim and his Emperor's Children. They were dispatched to go handle the situation and bring them back into the fold of the Imperium. Now at this point, their heretical tendencies were not known to the Emperor or the Council of Terra. Mr. Lupercal, knowing this, and knowing he had to handle his loyalist problem, devised a plan of ironic betrayal. The first wave of soldiers that would be sent down would go by drop pod. This is a different measure than they usually took, mostly because it's hard to fly a drop pod back off the planet once you realize you've been betrayed. All of the soldiers that were part of this force were actually the loyalist soldiers that he knew of in his legion, as well as the 3 other legions. They landed on the planet and presumably were there to quash the revolt and betrayal against the Imperium, only to be betrayed themselves as a virus bombing campaign was unleashed on the planet, killing everything down there. Then, once everything had rotted, they started a firestorm on the entire planet, wiping out life. Now, luckily for the loyalists on the planet, Saul Tarvitz was able to tip them off to what was going on. They managed to lock themselves in sealed bunkers and protect themselves and survive on the planet. This made Angron very angry. The angry boy himself decided to descend upon the planet, completely abandoning the orders from Horus himself. Horus then had to respond by sending more forces down to try to take care of the loyalists that were left on the planet's surface. It was a long, protracted battle and cost the traitor legions dearly. So at the end of the day, this betrayal was bitter, but at least it hurt them to do so. At number 2, we have Trooper Lijah Cuu. So this one might be a little bit of a spoiler alert going on. I mean, I guess if you didn't know that Horus betrayed the Emperor or that Luther betrayed the Lion, those also could have been spoiler alerts. But this one feels a little extra spoilery since it's essentially a big part of some novels. So if you haven't read the Gonsko series and you plan to, then perhaps you need to skip this part here and save yourself some minor spoilers. So I will put in a timestamp here to when you can skip ahead in the video to go find the next section. But if you want to stick around, I encourage you to do so. Okay, so everyone who doesn't want to be spoiled is gone. All right, so here at number 2 is Trooper Lijah Cuu of the Tanith First and Only. Now, this betrayal is very personal and left me in tears as I read it in the book about his betrayals. Brought into the ranks of the Tanith First and Only after the battles at Vervenhive, Trooper Lijah Cuu was one of many soldiers that were given the opportunity for a second chance in a universe that doesn't often give second chances. Colonel Ibram Gaunt knew that he needed more troopers in his forces in order to continue fighting the forces of chaos, so he brought in these Vervenhivers to fill out their ranks. Trooper Cuu is a big old jerkface. He committed many atrocious actions while within the forces of the Tanith First and Only. From taking gold coins that had been defaced with the marks of chaos, to literally raping and murdering a civilian. This man is not good news. The moment of betrayal against the Ghost, though, was when he killed Try Again Bragg. With tears in my eyes, I have never wanted to punch a fictional character in the face more than when he did that. Except perhaps when he later killed Colonel Korbeck. This man was nothing. He was a basest of human, if you could even say that. And at the end, he was taken mental control over by the forces of chaos. But this betrayal, while maybe not unforeseen, was super personal and super rending to have happen and see happen. I know that the love that many of the troopers had for the War Master when he betrayed them must have felt heartrending. But to me as a reader, it felt so visceral when he killed those two people in the Ghost Gaunts. We followed along with them for many in action, and to see that happen was devastating. Which is why I have it ranking up there at number 2, because of the impact that it had on me, and I'm sure many readers as they read the series. A fantastic series. Do it if you haven't. That spoiler alert will not ruin the series for you, I promise you. Read it if you've listened to this and still decide that you want to go back to. Highly recommended. And at number 1, the Horus Heresy itself. So the last betrayal on this list is the biggest betrayal in the history of Warhammer 40,000. When Horus Lupercal and his fellow traitor Primarchs turned their back on the Emperor of Mankind, they set off a chain of events that would come to define the very world of Warhammer 40,000 10,000 years later. Brother betraying brother, son betraying father, man betraying man. The heresy epitomized the greatest of all betrayals, a complete abandonment of what it meant to be human. The Dark Gods have tempted humanity throughout history, but to now have the demigod power of the Primarchs and their legions at their disposal meant that they could strike out at humanity and reality beyond the walls of the warp. That act had tore asunder all the work the Emperor had done to reunite humanity and bring the universe under the auspices of mankind. The Imperium was left a ragged shell of its former glory, and the scars of that event still hold humanity back to this day, or to that day, to this point in the narrative. And to be honest, probably always will. And for that fact, that alone means that it has to be at number 1 in this list of betrayals in the Warhammer universe. So there we have it. The Glacial Geek's far from definitive, certainly subjective, and certainly not exhaustive list of betrayals in the Warhammer universe. There are dozens of examples of people turning on their allies. And I'd love to hear if you think there are any that should have been on this list down below. Let me know and we'll continue this list. There's tons of stuff. That's what makes all of this 40k lore and history so much fun to read. The twists and turns that have happened throughout the history. But let me know down below if you agree with this list, what you think should have changed, what you think should have been added. And I certainly hope you guys have all enjoyed it. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek as always. And until next time, have fun.